Hello and welcome. You're tuned into The Current. My name is Erin Curren. I'm your host, and The Current is a talk show where we talk about embracing life change, shifting perspective, and sparking curiosity. Today, it is truly an honor and a privilege to have Professor of Psychology, Dr. Krista Aronson, on The Current. She's a professor at Bates College, as well as an Associate Dean of Faculty there. And Krista is also the co-founder and director of a fascinating and important project called the Diverse Bookfinder, which we'll talk about later on in the show. Krista, thank you so much for making time in your schedule to come on The Current.
Thank you so much, Erin, and thank you for such a lovely introduction. I'm happy to be here today.
Well, there's so many things I want to talk to you about. Your work is critical, I find, to not only the times we live in, but to the development of our young people and to growing awareness of parents everywhere. We're both in Maine. You teach at Bates College. How did you get started exploring these themes, interested in psychology? Can you speak to a little bit to that?
Sure. I can start with how I became interested in psychology. It's oddly enough, I've always been interested in psychology. And when I was in high school, I participated in a program, a summer program in engineering at Cornell University. So for 1 month every summer, we would go and gather as a cohort and do engineering projects and live in college dorms. And it really gave me a taste for what college would be like. And I thought I wanted to be an engineer. But at the end of the 4 years, we got to pick our final project to do on our own. And I really wanted to do something different. And so I gravitated towards a project in psychology and focused on neuroscience and loved it, and then applied to undergraduate thinking I would go study psychology, which I did, and working for a couple of years at Cornell University and in psychology, and then going on for my PhD. So I think there's always been an interest there in the field. Yeah. But I think that my specific focus, which is on race and culture, really comes from my own experience as a mixed-race woman and really trying to make sense of so many of the dynamics that I witnessed in my own life, whether that be in my own family. Half of my family is of African descent, African-American slave descendants, and the other half is really strongly identified with an Irish immigrant background. And so having access to both of those communities and exploring both of those worlds and exploring it as a person who was different in both, really raised some questions for me. And growing up in an exclusively white environment, I grew up in the suburbs of Rochester, New York. It was always something that I just wanted to make sense of someday, all the things I was experiencing and seeing. And so that led me to focus on race and culture. I suppose we're all drawn to do things based on our own experiences.
Yeah. Thank you for giving us that sort of snapshot of how you came to be. I know it's hard to compact into a brief introduction like that. That is so true. You know, we are all influenced by our experience as young people, I think, for sure. And the interest in the Diverse Bookfinder and how identities, how children form their own identity, and the importance of literature in that regard, and seeing characters in children's books that looked like the children reading them, you know, and what in particular, I came across you on Instagram, a beautiful 3-minute video you were doing in the context of the beautiful Blackbird Festival for Indigo Arts here in Portland. And you talked about, you know, imagine a book from your childhood. You know, put yourself back in that place, the magic and the sort of escape that children's books give us as young people.
Did you think of a book when you saw that? Did a book come to mind?
Yeah, I did. I thought of some different books. I thought of books, you know, there were books that were read to me, like The Twits. I don't know if you've ever seen this book. It's a very bizarre book. And then other books, you know, like Little Fur Child, The Little Fur Family, The Little Fur, I don't know, these are books that just were fleeting across my mind as I was listening to you in this sort of guided meditation. But what is it about children that makes this project of yours so important? What is it about children's literature that inspired you to do this diverse bookfinder project?
Yeah, I mean, I think that you've touched on it in what you've said, that these books that we may have just a passing with in childhood can imprint and affect us in ways that we are conscious or unconscious of. I know that I came to picture books through parenting, and really thinking about how to help my own children connect with their heritages, their mixed race children, and feel positive about who they are and where they come from. And picture books are a really nice platform for that. They're relatively short. They're hopefully beautiful with their pictures and their words, not just mimicking one another, but playing with one another. And they can provide a nice vehicle to launch conversations with children beyond what's even in them. And so in my own parenting, I encountered a challenge with my oldest daughter, who's just turned 18. And when she was in, kindergarten, first grade? So this is a long time ago now, I suppose, although it doesn't feel like that. And she is a brown girl about my complexion, and we were living in a white community in Maine, and she started getting questions from her friends, like, are you Somali? And she'd come home to me, and I'd say, well, the real answer to the question is because of the legacy of slavery, we don't know, but you're not Somali in the way that your friends are asking you. And so she'd come back and tell them, and then she'd come back home, and then she'd say, well, my friends say that I can't play with Somali children then because I'm not Somali. And we would unpack that. Mm. And then the final kind of thing for me was when she came home and said, we played dodgeball at school today. I don't know of any sentence that begins with that ends well. So I was kind of braced, like, what happened? And she said, well, it was Somali against non-Somali. And no one knew which team I was supposed to be on because I'm not Somali, but I'm brown. And this was all kind of circling around all the questions that she was getting asked. And I've never wanted to define my children's identities for them, but instead to let them know their options and help them come to their own internalized identities, whether they're different from or similar to my own. And so, she said, my friends decided that I should, because I'm brown, I should play with the Somali children. And that really, because her friends had been a white group that had really othered her, and her best friend was the one who kind of made the final suggestion that she go over and play with the Somali children, not as though it was a lot. And I thought, okay, so these kids, they need a little help. They need a little guidance and thinking about how to play across difference. Yeah. And I found research in England. I happened to be on sabbatical, so I have the privilege of getting paid to think about what I want to think about, right? Yeah. And I found some research in England that was using picture books to help kids play across difference. And I contacted the lead researcher on that, Rupert Brown. I was also done in collaboration with Lindsay Cameron. And Rupert and I wrote a grant, and I went over and got to work with them for a while. I got to take my family over. And Rupert also came here, and together we created a research project using picture books. And that went really well. 500 kids, Southern Maine, positive outcomes, using picture books to help children break down prejudice and help them change their attitudes about playing across difference. Yeah. But it wasn't really satisfying to me because, first of all, there were no books published in the United States that had Somali and non-Somali children playing together and having fun. So we had to write our own. And that's how I met Annie O'Brien, who is a co-founder with me of the Diverse Bookfinder. And when we were done, there was also all of our work that we had created, Rupert and I, was behind a paywall. Not everybody could access it to read about it. Teachers, parents, other interested people, and interesting people. And so we decided, I decided that I really wanted to engage this a little bit more, but in a more public way, in terms of thinking about, well, what are the different messages that are out there in picture books, and what effect might they have on children? If we know cross-group books can help children want to play across difference, well, what other messages are there? That's a really long answer, but that's how I got into picture books, through my children, through my own lived experience, using my privilege to take time to dig into community challenges and try and contribute to the conversations on the topic.
Yeah, it's the first time I'm hearing this expression, playing across difference, and I'm struck by just how much that applies to all ages in our community, in our segregated communities, and just how much systemic racism, housing, racism in housing, racism throughout the decades has separated our communities. And so we don't grow up as neighbors a lot of the time, and we grow up not knowing each other, different backgrounds, different cultures. And how do we bridge that divide? It's like we need picture books for adults these days. We need to engage in these conversations and play across difference and talk across difference, and be open to not shying away from discomfort or the unknown, of a conversation on race with like members of my own family. I'm speaking personally. It's not always comfortable for me to talk to other white people about race, but I need to start doing that more, I'm realizing these days.
Yeah.
I want to give viewers a little tour of the Diverse Bookfinders website, if that's okay. Maybe you can talk us through. Yeah. I'm going to go ahead and share the screen.
Great.
And we're landing on the home page here. You can see there's this great little button that'll move us. It says start here, all the way up in the right-hand corner. And
that has some helpful information about who we are and what we do and what differentiates us within the diverse book space. You'll see in the top band there that we have, so that's the information. What are we? Why do we include all books? Not just the good. We have the good, the bad, and the ugly, although we do flag those books that have been identified by cultural reviewers as problematic. We also offer a lot of resources for our multiple audiences. We're funded by the Institute for Museum and Library Services, and so our primary audience right now is librarians. But we are a resource for parents. We are a resource for educators. Anyone working with children who's interested in understanding more about diverse books and finding them may want to check us out. So if you scroll down a little bit, I can give you just a little more. So we are a circulating collection. All the books that you see represented online are part of the Ladd Library at Bates College, and they can be checked out by anyone in the world through interlibrary loan. We're also a search tool, and so if you want to click on the search tool, we can show folks a little bit what that is. I get calls all the time and emails all the time from parents and grandparents and educators who are interested in finding books that represent their own families and their own children. And it's important to understand that that's hard, that not people say, like, what am I doing wrong? And the truth is that the ways in which publishers market books and the way that we talk about books, the way that we catalog them in library systems, Library Congress subject headings, focus more on what's happening in the book than who is in the book. And so it's hard to find books if you're interested in specifically looking for books through to identify characters of particular racial or cultural background. So you can search our website. You can type anything you want into the open search bar if you want, birthdays, crocodiles, whatever the child you're looking for might be into. If you don't find anything, it's because there are no books on that topic that feature children of color. And that's in and of itself interesting sometimes. If you're interested in looking for a specific race or culture or character with that background, you can click on any of our racial, cultural features there, facets, filters, and see. We also include tribal affiliations and homelands, ethnicity, hundreds of ethnicities, immigration status, whether or not a character in the book is an immigrant or migrant character, gender, including multiple gender and gender identities.
Wow.
And then if you click on our content, then we also have some additional categories that are of interest to people that our metadata librarian tells us that Library of Congress subject headings might not do systematically or in an organized way. So if you're looking for a book on activism, or if you specifically want a book that features a disabled character, if you're interested in a diverse family, that might be if you're interested in finding books about divorce or non-traditional family types, economic struggle. LGBTQ would be our LGBTQ families, STEM. So all of those things are also of interest to people. So my favorite example to give about why finding these books is so hard is that, you know, I love this book called The Sandwich Swap. It's about a Caucasian girl, a white child, and a Mina character, so an Arab descended character. They're friends and they get into a kerfuffle over sandwiches. One doesn't like how one's hummus smells and voices it, and then the other retaliates by saying that peanut butter and jelly is just disgusting. And this becomes this food fight. I wish I had the book handy. I was just reading it to my daughter, my 5-year-old, the other night. She really likes it. And they've got to resolve it. There are lots of teachers who face this challenge, right, within their own schools. If they did a search in their card catalogs for this book, they wouldn't find it because the subject headings are toleration, which I don't know what that means, sandwiches. And so it doesn't pinpoint who is in the book. Yeah. So you can find books like that by looking at our cross-group category and then searching either openly for that or specific racial or cultural groups that are interacting with one another.
Yeah. That just toleration and sandwiches sounds like the least the least relevant subject headings for that book, you know.
I know.
And who would come up with those words, toleration and anyway. Great example, and thank you for walking us through. There's, like you said, there's many more resources, and I would encourage viewers to check out. I'll put the link to the website, and they can also follow the Diverse Bookfinder on Instagram and Facebook. And
yeah, or subscribe to our newsletter.
Cool.
To get specific information about projects and updates.
Yeah. You know, Krista, you've already touched on some of the things that I usually ask guests about, including like a moment of life change. You know, growing up for you, you've talked personally about the challenges you faced in this mixed race home, coming from different backgrounds. You've talked about the challenge of your daughter's experience with school, not being a Somali, not being a non-Somali, like where do I fit in? How do I play, you know, and getting pushback from her peers. I wonder, and you're giving back. I like to talk about service on the show, and you're giving back so many ways with this Diverse Bookfinder and other ways. I wonder if there are questions that you're pondering right now in our current times, if there's an expression of your intellectual curiosity that's new for you, that's something you'd like to share with viewers, questions you're pondering now in particular, or something that you're engaged in this moment?
Where to begin? I mean, I think that you touched on when you were talking about some of the questions that you're having. How do I have these conversations? How do I deal with the discomfort that the conversations bring? I mean, first of all, it'll always be uncomfortable. There's no way around that. Yeah. And it just, you build the muscle and you get more comfortable with the discomfort. So just plow forth and know that you're going to make mistakes. Yeah. Know that you're going to say things you wish you hadn't said. And that's, as long as you address them whether they're in the moment and say, my gosh, as I say that out loud, I don't like the way that sounds. That's not consistent with my values. Or apologize humbly. Humility is a huge part of all of this work. So, I mean, I think all of those questions about how do we now push ourselves forward even farther, no matter where we are in this process of identity development. What does it mean to be a white American? What does it mean to be a white ally? For me, what does it mean to be a mixed race person within this conversation? And how do I continue to meet people find people where they are, but help them also move forward? It's a big part of how I consider this work, whether it's in my teaching or whether it's in the diverse bookfinder work or whether it's in my administrative capacity. Mm-hmm. So where are we? What's the next level? How do we get there as individuals and as a society? How can I participate? How can I help? Are all questions that I'm thinking about. Yeah. Other questions are, what are we going to do with our children? And how are we going to, as a 5-year-old, what are her needs right now? What about my 18-year-old's needs? How do we help our children, whether they're in our home or in general? How do we help them address these questions that they have? How do we meet them where they are and help them move forward? Yeah. And how do we help them find resilience in the face of this? Yeah. Are all the things that I'm constantly churning over, right? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's, I don't have kids myself, but I talk to my sister, who's, with my niece at home, and, just how significant it is to not be with a peer group. My niece is going to be in 8th grade, and
that's a really tough time to be apart from your peers. That's really tough.
And I think each age presents a challenge. We're just so accustomed to being with friends and to being with groups, and yeah. So I guess we can take solace in that we're all in this together, and we're not presenting necessarily answers. Well, I say we're all in this together, and as I'm saying this, it's like, yes, and we all have a very different experience of what's happening. I saw an editorial title, which is like, really kind of stung when I first saw it, but it's so true. It's like, people of color, Black people suffer, and white people join a book group. It's like there's different levels of awareness and taking this, what's happening in. And I think so much of the privilege that I've experienced is an option. It's optional to engage in these conversations. It's optional to go there. And I'm realizing it's not optional, and that's a real awakening for me personally. And to your point, it wasn't optional for you as a child growing up. You were faced with these questions and these issues from the moment you had consciousness, it sounds like. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I think being aware of our privilege and deciding how we're going to use it is really important. And I don't think there's anything wrong with book group, especially if it's one that is furthering your understanding and providing community and hopefully connecting with role models who can help you think about how you do this. I think that's really important. But I do think also asking the questions about how might I engage with this more deeply, and what is my role within this work is really important.
Yeah, yeah. Krista, as our time draws to a close, I feel like we've touched on so many things. I'll provide more links for people to explore your research and the Diverse Bookfinder website. Is there anything else you'd like viewers to know? Any additional resources you'd like to direct them to, or anything else? Yeah.
I think that I'd like to acknowledge the unique space where we are in Maine. There are a lot of us doing this work in Maine, whether in the visual arts, right? There's the Diverse Bookfinder. You mentioned the beautiful Blackbird Festival, which is a festival that's going on right now online, where Black and brown authors will read aloud their books and creations from around the country, and also so parents can find read alouds. I'm holding this one because Going Home Down Home with Daddy by illustrated by Daniel Minter and written by Kelly Starling Lyons is the current feature. You can go to the Diverse Book Finder Instagram or Facebook pages to see the author read that aloud, and then also to have activities. So that's Indigo Arts and the Diverse Book Finder, who are both located right here within Maine, and also in partnership with I'm Your Neighbor Books, which is another Portland-based, Maine-based, book-focused organization that focuses on our new neighbors, our immigrant neighbors, and depictions and resources in that arena. We also have Our Shelves right here in Maine, which is a book box subscription service for parents who are interested in receiving picture books and board books focused on diversity regularly in their home. So curated books, books that have been identified as of high quality. And I do sit on both the I'm Your Neighbor and the Our Shelves board as well. So I would direct folks to take a look at those resources, as well as, Always Embrace Race, based in Massachusetts, is another resource where I would guide people if they want more information about, well, how do I have these conversations with my children? How do I have these conversations with my friends? Embrace Race can be a great guide for that. For librarians, check out our collection analysis tool. To help you identify gaps in representation in your own picture book collections. We also have a competitive grant through the Brooks Family Foundation to support Maine libraries in the purchase of books that they've identified through their use of the collection analysis tool. Absolutely. Yeah. I'm
Wonderful.
sure there are more.
Yeah. Well, that's a great start. And as always, when we start digging, we always find more. But you've listed a whole slew, and I'll be sure to include links to all those websites that you mentioned. And
great.
Thank you so much, Krista. Any parting thoughts?
Good luck. I mean, and I mean that with all warmth and positivity. Is that what we're facing is. I don't even know. There's so many people who've used different words to describe it, but it's a lot. But we can do it. So good luck.
And good luck to you with your 18-year-old and your 5-year-old at home, and all the important work you're doing. Thank you so much, Krista, for joining us.
Absolutely. Thanks for giving me the opportunity. I enjoyed speaking with you.
Great. And
take care.
You've been tuned into The Current. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time. Bye for now.